Good morning. I'm Warren Buffett, the chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, and on my left is Charlie Munger, the vice chairman of my partner, and we'll try to get him to say a few words at some point in the proceedings. The format today is going to be just slightly different. We have one item to. Normally we breeze through the meeting pretty fast, and we'll do that. But we have one item of business on the preferred stock that I could tell caused some confusion with people. So I'll discuss that a little bit. And if before the vote on that anybody would like to talk about the preferred issue, we'll have any comments or questions at that time. And then we'll breeze through the rest of the meeting, and then we'll open it up. And I'll have one announcement to make then, too. And then after that, we'll go for maybe close to noon. And feel free earlier, anybody that would like to leave, you're free to, obviously, at any time. Better form to do it while Charlie's talking, as I've mentioned. And you'll have to be quick. But then we'll have a break a little before noon for a few minutes while a more orderly retreat can be conducted, and we'll have buses outside to take you back to the hotels or to any of the commercial establishments that Berkshire's involved in, and then because so many of we have people here, at least based on the tickets reserved, from 49 of the 50 states. Only Vermont is absent. But we have Alaska. We have a delegation from every place. We have people from Australia, Israel, Sweden, France, UK, 40-some from Canada. So a lot of people have come a long way. So Charlie and I will stick around. In fact, we'll eat our lunch right up here, and we will. You don't want to watch what we eat. We'll stick around until perhaps as late as even 3 o'clock. But if the crowd gets below a couple of hundred, then we'll feel we can cut it off. But we do want to answer everyone's questions. You people are part owners of the company, and any question that relates to your ownership of Berkshire, we want to be able to give you a chance to ask. And it's tough because of the numbers of people here. I don't know how many are in the other room, but there are about 3,300, I believe, in this room, and we want to get to all of you. So that will come after the meeting. Now we've got a little business to take care of. The meeting will come to order, and I'll first introduce the directors of Berkshire in addition to myself. They're right down here, and if you'll stand up when I give your name. Susan T. Buffett. And Howard Buffett. These are names we found in the phone book, you can understand. Malcolm Chase III. And Walter Scott, Jr. Also with us today are partners in the firm of Deloitte & Touche, our auditors, Mr. Ron Burgess and Mr. Craig Christensen. They are available to respond to appropriate questions you might have concerning their firm's audit of the accounts of Berkshire. Mr. Forrest Crutter is Secretary of Berkshire. He will make a written record of the proceedings. Mr. Robert M. Fitzsimmons has been appointed Inspector of Elections at this meeting. He will certify to the account of votes cast in the election for directors. The named proxy holders for this meeting are Walter Scott, Jr. and Mark Hamburg. Proxy cards have been returned through last Friday, representing 998,258 Berkshire shares to be voted by the proxy holders as indicated on the cards. That number of shares represents a quorum, and we will therefore directly proceed with the meeting. We will conduct the business of the meeting and then adjourn the formal meeting. After that, we will entertain questions you might have. First order of business will be a reading of the minutes of the last meeting of shareholders. I recognize Mr. Walter Scott, Jr. will place a motion before the meeting.
I move that the reading of the minutes of the last meeting of the shareholders be dispensed with.
Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second?
I second the motion.
The motion has been moved and seconded. Are there any comments or questions? We will vote on the comments or questions. We will vote on the motion by voice vote. All of those in favor say aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Secretary, have a report of the number of Berkshire shares outstanding entitled to vote and represented at the meeting.
Yes, I do. As indicated in the proxy statement that accompanied the notice of this meeting that was sent by first-class mail to all shareholders of record on March 7, 1995, being the record date for this meeting, there were 1,177,750 shares of Berkshire common stock outstanding, with each share entitled to one vote on motions considered at the meeting. Of that number, 998,258 shares are represented at this meeting by proxies returned through last Friday.
Thank you. If a shareholder is present who wishes to withdraw a proxy previously sent in and vote in person on the two items of business provided for in the proxy statement, he or she may do so. Also, if any shareholder that is present has not turned in a proxy and desires a ballot in order to vote in person on these two items, you may do so. If you wish to do this, please identify yourself to meeting officials in the aisles who will furnish two ballots to you, one for each item. With those persons desiring ballots, please identify themselves so we may distribute them. Just raise your hand and you'll get one. The first item of business of this meeting is to elect directors. I now recognize Mr. Walter Scott, Jr. to place a motion before the meeting with respect to election of directors.
I move that Warren E. Buffett, Susan T. Buffett, Howard G. Buffett, Malcolm G. Chase III, Charles T. Munger, and Walter Scott, Jr. be elected as directors.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded that Warren E. Buffett, Susan T. Buffett, Howard G. Buffett, Malcolm G. Chase III, Charles T. Munger, and Walter Scott, Jr. be elected as directors. Are there any other nominations? Is there any discussion? You're doing fine. The nominations are ready to be acted upon. If there are any shareholders voting in person, they should now mark their ballots on the election for directors and allow the ballots to be delivered to the Inspector of Election. Collect those, please. Would the proxy holders please also submit to the Inspector of Elections a ballot on the election of directors voting the proxies in accordance with the instructions they've received. Mr. Fitzsimmons, when you're ready, you may give your report.
My report is ready. The ballot of the proxy holders received through last Friday cast not less than 996,892 votes for each nominee. That number far exceeds the majority of the number of shares outstanding. The certification required by Delaware law regarding the precise count of the votes, including the votes cast in person at this meeting, will be given to the Secretary to be placed with the minutes of this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimmons. Warren E. Buffett, Susan T. Buffett, Howard G. Buffett, Malcolm G. Chase III, Charles T. Munger, and Walter Scott, Jr. have been elected as directors. The second item of business of this meeting is to consider the recommendation of the Board of Directors to amend the company's certificate of incorporation. The proposed amendment would add a provision to the certificate of incorporation authorizing the Board of Directors to issue up to 1 million shares of preferred stock in one or more series with such preferences, limitations, and relative rights as the Board of Directors may determine. Now, we discussed this some in the annual report, but I would say, and we'll find out the exact number, but I think we probably had 11 or 12, maybe 12,000 or so shares voted against the proposal, and I think we had a couple thousand shares that abstained. And since there really is no downside to the proposal, that indicated to me that I had not done a very adequate job of explaining the logic of authorizing the preferred. So I'd like to discuss that for a minute now, and I'd also like anybody that would like to ask questions about it. They can do so now. We can talk about it later too, but if you'd like to do it before the vote, that'd be fine. The authorization is just that. It's an authorization. It's not a command to issue shares. It's not a directive. It simply gives the directors of the company the ability, in a situation where it makes sense for the company to issue preferred shares, to do so. Now, when we acquire businesses, and I'll tell you about one when we're through with this in a few minutes. When we acquire businesses, sometimes the seller of the business wants cash. Sometimes they would like common stock, and it's certainly possible, as one potential seller did in that case, a convertible preferred stock. Now, from our standpoint, as long as the value of the consideration that we give equates, we really don't care aside from a question of tax basis we might obtain. But in other economic respects, we don't care what form of consideration we use, because we will equate the value of cash versus a straight preferred versus a convertible preferred versus common stock, whatever it may be. So if the worry is that we will do something dumb in issuing the preferred stock, that's a perfectly valid worry, but you should worry just as much we'll do something dumb in terms of using cash or the common stock. I mean, if we're going to do something unintelligent, we can do it with a variety of instruments, and we will not get more licentious in our behavior or anything, but simply because we have the preferred stock. And the preferred stock, a preferred stock may offer sellers of a business the chance to do a tax-free exchange with us, and they may not want common stock because they may have an ownership situation where they don't want to run the risks of common stock ownership. And that's why our preferred is flexible as to terms, because we could give those people a straight preferred with a coupon that made it worth par at the time we issued it, and then they would know what their income would be for the next umpteen years, and that may be of paramount interest to them. We could issue them an adjustable rate preferred, which, as money market conditions change, would also change its coupon, and then they would be sure of a constant principal value for the rest of their lifetimes. And one or both of those factors could be more important to one seller or another, so that we simply have more forms of currency available to make acquisitions if we have the ability to issue various forms of preferred, because a preferred stock, if it's properly structured, allows for the possibility of a tax-free transaction with the seller, and that's important to many sellers. Now, in the end, many sellers will prefer cash just as in the past, and probably most of the sellers that don't want cash will want common stock. But we will have a preferred stock available. We're only authorizing 1 million shares because under Delaware law, there's an annual, I think there's an annual fee. I know there's an initial fee, and I think there's an annual fee that relates to the amount of shares authorized. So if we authorized 100 million shares, we would be paying a larger annual fee, which is something Mr. Munger wouldn't let me do. So what we will do if we issue this, we will issue, undoubtedly, we will issue some sub-shares so that the number of shares for taxation purposes is relatively limited, but that we will issue sub-shares to make it easier to make change, essentially, in the market. We may issue, if the occasion demands, we may issue convertible preferred, but that convertible preferred would not be worth any more at the time we issue it than a straight preferred. We would adjust in terms of the coupon and the conversion price and so on. So we can equate various forms of currency to fit the desires of the seller of the business, and this is simply one more tool to do it. There's no downside, like I say, unless we do something stupid. And if we do something stupid with this, we would do something stupid with cash or whatever. So we probably should have done this some time ago, but we never had a case of a seller wanting that form of currency before, and so it just and we always felt we could get it authorized promptly, but there's no reason to lose a couple of months if a transaction is pending to call a meeting to get this on the books. So it's simply one more tool, and if there anybody that has any questions or comments on the preferred, like I say, you can hold them till later, but I'd be glad to have them before we have the vote. Do we have any? Yeah, there's a question over there. If you'll wait just a second, we'll get a microphone to you. When you ask questions now or later, if you'll give your name and where you live, I'd appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Dr. Lawrence Wasser. I'm from New York. The question is this. If you want to buy a business and the people in the business want cash, you have to have cash. Cash that, this kind of cash.
We're familiar with it.
Yeah. But it strikes me that the preferred isn't really cash. It's fiat currency. That is, it's currency that we can create.
That's true. It's like common stock in that respect. It is a form. It's an alternate form of currency, and but it is just in terms of common stock, for example. Assuming we had enough authorized, we have an unlimited ability to create currency. Now, if we create it at the wrong price, it dilutes the value of the old currency. But go ahead.
Until we vote in the affirmative, which I'm sure that this group will probably do because of their confidence in you, but until we vote in the affirmative, it doesn't exist.
That is correct. That would be true, incidentally, with common stock. If we had no more authorized common stock out than we had issued, we have, I think, 1.5 million authorized. But let's assume that we'd issued all that we had authorized. Until more was authorized by the shareholders, it would not be available to be issued.
But if more were authorized by the shareholders, then isn't it true that the value of the shareholders' holding would be diluted?
Only if we receive less in value than we give. That's the key to it. I mean, if we issue $200 million worth of preferred and we receive a business that's only worth $150 million, there's no question you're worse off than before. So are we, incidentally. But we're all worse off. And that's true if we give cash that's worth more for a business than the business is worth. If we give $200 million of cash for a business that's worth $150 million, we are worse off. We may not have issued a share of stock, but we have diluted the value of your stock if we do that. As long as we get value received in terms of whether of cash, common stock, or preferred stock, then you are not diluted in terms of value. It's an important point. And obviously a number of companies, as you may have, Charlie and I have commented about in reports and elsewhere, a number of companies, in our opinion, have issued common stock, particularly, which has a value greater than what they receive. And when they do that, they are running what John Medlin of the Wachovia called a chain letter in reverse. That's cost American shareholders a lot of money. I don't think it'll cost them any money at Berkshire, but it's a perfectly valid worry for shareholders to have, because a management can build an empire just by issuing these little pieces of paper, which they feel don't cost them anything. I think Charlie had one story about that in the past. You want to comment on that, Charlie? No names basis, of course.
There was a particular bank where one of the officers wanting stock options pointed out to the management that they could issue all these shares and it didn't cost anything. Now imagine hiring a manager who thinks that way and paying them money to behave like Judas in your very midst.
We have had conversations with managers where they tell us how fortunate they feel because the stock is down and they can issue options cheaper. Now, if they were issuing those to third parties, I'm not sure whether they'd have exactly the same attitude, but we have no feeling that we're getting richer when we issue shares. We have a feeling we're getting richer when we get at least as much value in a business as the shares are worth that we issue. And we don't intend to issue them under any other circumstances, but it's a perfectly valid worry.
The second part of the question is that obviously with preferred issue, you have a situation where the common shareholder moves to the back of the line, as it were. Why should the common shareholder in this room want to step to the back of the line if he's at the front of the line now?
Well, but it's also true if we buy a business for cash and let's say we borrow the money, the bank that we borrow the money from will come ahead of the common shareholder. There's no question. Anytime you engage in transactions that involve the capital structure, potential for each part of the capital structure. If you issue a lot of common and you've got some debt outstanding, you've generally improved the position of the debt. And the question really becomes whether you think that the position of the common shareholder is improved by issuing either preferred stock or perhaps borrowing a lot of money to make an acquisition. I mean, a couple of times in the history of Berkshire, we've borrowed money to buy something, to buy a business. And when we do that, we are placing a bank or an insurance company or whomever ahead of the position of the common shareholder. We did that when we issued some debt a few years back. And there's a question of weighing whether the common shareholders are going to be better off by borrowing money. But borrowing money is not necessarily at all harmful to shareholders, although certainly if it's carried to excess it is. And the preferred is a form of quasi borrowed money that does rank ahead of the common shareholder, but then at the same time we're adding a business which we think is going to benefit the shareholder if we issue that. So that's the trade-off. Yeah.
My name is Matt Zuckerman. I'm from Miami, Florida. My question is, it seems to me that there's some requirement for shareholder votes if convertible stock, preferred stock is issued beyond a certain limit. What are those limits?
There are no limits on the conversion term that we might do, but for example, if we were going to issue a convertible preferred now, we have no plans to do it, but it could happen. In fact, it might well happen this year. We would, and the alternative we'll say was giving somebody $100 million in cash for a business. If we were to issue a straight preferred, we would figure out what $100 million worth of a straight preferred would sell for, what coupon would be necessary. And that would depend on call provisions and a few things. But for a AAA credit like Berkshire, it would be somewhere in the area of 7% or thereabouts. And then they would have no participation in the upside of the common. If they wanted something that was sure to maintain its principal value, then you have to issue an adjustable rate preferred that will keep its value around par. That preferred might have an initial coupon of, say, 5% or something of the sort because it has the ability to go up or down based on interest rates, but it would always be worth about par. If we were to issue a convertible preferred, it might have a conversion price of, just to pick a figure, $28,000 or something of the sort, and a coupon well below the coupon on a straight preferred. And so whatever we did, they would equate out in our mind as to the value we were giving. We're not going to give 120% of X if we're only willing to pay 100% of X just because the form of a deal changes. But you may well see us issue at some point. You may see us issue a convertible preferred. You may see us issue a straight preferred. You may see us issue an adjustable rate preferred. I hope we do something because if we do it, we'll think we're better off.
Based on your past performance, I'm sure you'll get more value than you give.
Well,
but in any case, it was my understanding that if the amount of shares issued for a conversion of a convertible issue were greater than 20% of the total amount of shares outstanding, then it would require a vote of the stockholders under Delaware law. I may be wrong.
I think it's a stock exchange rule, isn't it, Charlie?
Yes.
Yeah, you're right about the rule, but
It's a New York Stock Exchange.
New York Stock Exchange rule. That would be $5 billion plus of deal, and we would love to make a $5 billion deal, but I don't think we're going to do it. So I would say that the chances of any acquisition being large enough so that it requires a shareholder vote is probably slim, but it isn't because we wouldn't be interested. And if we have one, we'll be coming back to you with the votes already in hand. Are there any other questions on the preferred? We can talk more about it later too. I just want to make. Oh, here we are. Sure.
Good morning, Mr. Buffett.
Morning.
I'm Raina DeCosta-Loy from Chicago. I'm very proud to be here, and I've seen you grow so that pretty soon we're going to be out in the football field. I think your explanation was very helpful because as I read this, and I'm sure many of the other lay folk, I didn't understand what you were doing. And you mentioned the preferred stock, but in the prospectus, it's not clear whether it would be the convertible preferred, the straight preferred, and you cleared that answering a few other questions, but some of the people felt it would dilute their stock.
Yeah. Well, I should have made that clearer in the annual report, and I'm glad I've had this chance to do it today. Anything else on the preferred? Okay.
You don't have to come back to the shareholders for a vote after these shares are authorized for the terms of it. And you've discussed this in terms of buying companies. My question is, you yourself, through Berkshire Hathaway, own the preferred shares of several companies, Salomon, U.S. Air, American Express. Did those shareholders have to vote on the terms of the preferred shares that you bought for those companies, or was that left at the board of directors' decision level? Could you clarify that point?
Excuse me, go ahead.
Could you clarify that point, please?
Yeah. I think we've probably bought 6 issues of preferred directly from companies. And since none of those triggered that New York Stock Exchange rule that we discussed earlier, and they could have if they'd been somewhat larger, but they didn't, none of those deals had to be approved by the shareholders. I think the only deal we've had with a company that had to be approved by the shareholders was when we bought the Cap Cities ABC stock. Well, we bought it early in 1986. I think it was approved by their shareholders in 1985. But the only situations where it would have had to have been approved is if it triggered the New York Stock Exchange rule, and our purchases were not that large that they did that. Any other questions? Yep, there's one more.
My name is Dale Valkovitz. I'm from Champaign, Illinois. A recent issue of Barron's indicated that it may be possible to issue a best of all possible worlds preferred. That being one where the dividend looks like interest to the issuer and is tax deductible, and to the purchaser, it would qualify for the dividends received deduction. Do you think that structure might be possible with these shares?
Well, we haven't thought about that. I know what you're talking about on that, but I don't think it would be possible. For one thing, I don't think you could probably have a tax-free deal that way, Charlie. Do you?
We probably wouldn't try and be that cute.
I've got several quips in mind, but I think I'll keep them to myself. My guess is that form does not work for a long time. I know what you're talking about on it, but my guess is it doesn't. Some companies, and we'll get on with this, but some companies care about the consideration they give in a deal, whether it's cash or preferred or so on, because they care about the accounting treatment that they get. They usually want pooling treatment rather than purchase accounting treatment. I won't get into that here. I know it's going to disappoint you, but I won't get into that here. Although I may in the next annual report, and that is of absolutely no consequence to us. We care not a whit about the accounting treatment that we receive. We feel that we have a shareholder body that's intelligent enough to understand the economic reality of a transaction, and that by playing various games in terms of how we try to structure it and maybe flow part of the purchase price back through the income statement or anything of the sort, which is done, that's not something that we care about at all. We would rather do whatever makes the most sense for us and for the seller, and then explain to you whatever accounting peculiarities may arise out of the transaction. And that probably differentiates us from most companies, and it probably helps us make a deal occasionally. Anything else?
Really?
Okay, now I can hear you fine.
Okay, and I was wondering, will there be any opportunity for shareholders who may find the preferred issue preferable for any number of reasons to participate in that?
Well, if we issued a preferred and it became actively traded, let's say it was a company with many shareholders instead of a few, obviously that would be something that any new or present shareholder could make a decision on whether they preferred that issue than others. We could, but we have no plans of doing it, and I don't see it happening. We could offer to exchange preferred for present common, and it's conceivable a few people would have an interest, but most people have self-selected in terms of the kind of security they want to own in terms of owning Berkshire Common, so it's unlikely they would want to switch into a preferred, because we wouldn't have a premium of value. It would just be an alternative security. We could do that, though. And it would probably be a tax-free deal. We have no plans of doing that, but it's something that if we ever thought that enough people might want, we could offer it. No one would be obliged to take it. It's a good question. Okay, we'll move on. Is there a motion to adopt the Board of Directors' recommendation?
I move the adoption of the amendment to the fourth article of the Certificate of Corporation as set forth in Exhibit A of the company's proxy statement for this meeting.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Motion has been made and seconded to adopt the proposed amendment to the Certificate of Incorporation. Any further discussion? We are ready to act upon the motion. If there are any shareholders voting in person, they should now mark their ballot on the proposed amendment to the Certificate of Incorporation and allow the ballots to be delivered to the Inspector of Election. I think we're collecting a few there. Would the proxy holders please also submit to the Inspector of Elections a ballot on the proposed amendment voting the proxies in accordance with the instructions they have received? Wait just a second here. Mr. Fitzsimmons, when you are ready, you may give your report.
My report is ready. The ballot of the proxy holders received through last Friday cast not less than 928,889 in favor of the proposed amendment to the Certificate of Incorporation. That number far exceeds the majority of the number of all shares outstanding. The certification required by Delaware law regarding the precise count of the votes, including the votes cast in person at this meeting, will be given to the Secretary to be placed with the minutes of this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimmons. The amendment to the Certificate of Incorporation is set forth in Exhibit A to the proxy statement for this meeting is approved. After adjournment of the business meeting, I will respond to questions that you may have that relate to the businesses of Berkshire, but do not call for any action at this meeting. Does anyone have any further business to come before this meeting before we adjourn? If not, I recognize Mr. Walter Scott, Jr. to place this motion before the meeting.
I move this meeting be adjourned.
I second the motion.
Motion to adjourn has been made and second. We will vote by voice. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The meeting is adjourned. Now, I'd like to tell you about one thing that, since the annual report that some of you probably read about in the papers, but maybe not all of you have heard about. Just shortly after the annual report was issued, we completed a transaction with Hellsberg's Diamonds, with Barnett Hellsberg, who's here today. And Barnett, would you stand up, please? Right. There he is. Give him a hand. You may be interested in how it came about, because Barnett attended 2 of the last 3 meetings of Berkshire. He had a few shares in an IRA account, and he was here last year. And shortly after this meeting, I was back in New York City, and I was crossing the street at 58th Street, right near the Plaza Hotel on Fifth Avenue. And a woman said, "Mr. Buffett," and I turned around, and she came up and she said she'd attended the annual meeting last year, or a few days ago, and said that she enjoyed it. And I said, "That's terrific." And I started across again, and Barnett had been about 30 or 40 feet away. I didn't know him. And he had heard this woman, so he said the same thing, and I turned around, and we shook hands, first time I met him. And he said, he says, I might have a business you'd be interested in. And I get that all the time, so so I said, "Well, why don't you write me?" And a time went by, and I got a letter from Barnett, and he'd been thinking about doing something with the business. His father had started in 1915, and based in Kansas City that whole time. And he had been exploring various avenues, but probably in some part because of his background as a Berkshire shareholder, he had some specific interest in the company becoming associated with Berkshire. He cared very much about the company having a permanent home. He cared very much about it having an environment in which it could grow and be run autonomously and be based in Kansas City. And he wanted to receive something in exchange that he was happy to own for the rest of his life. And so we worked out a transaction just very shortly after the annual report went to press. And so now Berkshire, as of 12:01, I guess yesterday morning, the deal closed. There's this waiting period because of the Hart-Scott-Rodino Act and a few other things. The transaction closed, and now Berkshire is the owner of Helzberg's Diamonds, which has roughly 150 stores around perhaps 26 or 27 states. I'm not sure the exact number, and mostly in malls, although some others. It's been enormously successful. Barnett brought in Jeff Comment, who formerly ran Wanamaker's, about 8 years ago, I guess it is, and the company is both expanded in its traditional format. It's gone with a new format recently, which has been very successful. It is in its position in the jewelry industry. It tends to compete with the Zales or Gordon's, but it does a far better job. Their sales per store on roughly equivalent square footage will be very close to double what competitors achieve. It's got a magnificent morale and organizational structure, and the people. Barnett was very generous with people in making the sale. He took it out of his own pocket to treat people right because they'd done such a terrific job over the years. And I think you'll see Helzberg's become a very big factor in Berkshire over time, and it just shows you what can come out of these annual meetings. So the rest of you, do your stuff. So anyway, that is an acquisition that was made largely for common stock. It did not involve preferred, and because Barnett preferred common, but different people have different needs, and sometimes there's a group of shareholders that can have different priorities, and that's the reason we want to have various currencies. If we had not been able to use common stock, we would not have made this transaction, because Barnett has been in no hurry to write a large check to the government, and we can help him in that respect with a common stock deal. So anyway, we're glad to have Helzberg's become part of Berkshire. I wouldn't be surprised if we have another announcement or two in the next year before we have the next meeting. I hope so, but there's no guarantees. Now we're going to turn the meeting open for questions. We'll do it as we've done before. We've got this room divided into 6 zones, and if you will raise your hand, the monitor in your zone will recognize you, and we'll keep going around. We will not go to a second person in any zone until we've exhausted all those who have yet to ask their first question. We also have a zone in the overflow room, so there'll be a total of 7, and we'll just keep going around. If you'll identify yourself, please, and we'll be delighted to answer your questions, and the more the better. So we'll start with zone 1.
My name is Fred Ilfeld Jr. from Sacramento, California, and I wanted to ask if you could elaborate upon the logic of adding 2 family members to the Board of Trustees.
Well, it's terrific for family harmony, just to start with. As I've talked about in the annual report, if I die tonight, my stock goes to my wife, who is a member of the board of directors, and she will own that stock until her death, when it will go to a foundation. So there is a desire to have as long a term and permanent ownership structure as can really be done in terms of planning and the tax laws and so on. I mean, we have invited people like Helzberg's to join in with Berkshire into what we think is a particularly advantageous way for them to conduct a business and to know the future that they're joining. And part of knowing the future that they're joining involves knowing that the ownership is stable. And it will be stable for a very long period of time in Berkshire, probably about as long as anybody can plan for in this world. After my death, the family would not be involved in the management of the business, but they'd be involved in the ownership of the business. And you would have a very large, concentrated ownership position going well on into the foundation that would care very much about having the best management structure in place. And to, in effect, prepare for that over time, I think it's very advisable that family members who will not be involved in management but who will have a key ownership role to play become more and more familiar with the business and the philosophy behind it. I discussed that some in I guess it was the 1993 annual report, because I think it's important that you understand, and anybody that wants to sell us a business, if you've built a business since 1915, and you care enormously about it, and you care about the people that you've developed, but you've got something else you want to do in life, it's more, than advertising your car in the paper to sell it. I mean, it is a very important transaction to you, not just in terms of how much money you receive, but in terms of who you deliver, thousands of people that have joined you, who you deliver them to. And I think we have a structure that is about as good as you can do. Nothing is forever, but we have a structure that's about as good as you can do in terms of people knowing what they're getting into when they make a deal with us, and being able to count on the conditions that prevail at the time of the deal, continuing for a long period in the future. Many people, I had a fellow tell me the other day about a business where he'd been wooed by the acquirer, and the day after the deal, they came in and fired the top half dozen people. They'd had a secret plan all along. Well, I don't think you run into much of that. But what you do run into is the company that's the acquiring company itself either being acquired, or some new management coming along, or some new management consultant coming along and saying, well, this doesn't fit our strategic plan anymore, so let's dump this division. And people that join in with Berkshire can be relatively, I think, comfortable about nothing like that happening. Charlie, you want to elaborate on?
No.
I was hoping Charlie would have a near-life experience this morning, but keep encouraging him. Zone 2.
Hello, my name is Jim Lichty from Des Moines. I'm interested in, like Chrysler. Can you make a comment on the Chrysler Corporation?
No, I don't think I can make a comment on the Chrysler. I think Solomon Brothers, incidentally, has been retained by that. We have nothing to do with it. Charlie and I read that in the paper, and Charlie and I are not familiar normally with investment banking arrangements at Solomon, but it has been in the paper that Solomon's involved in that. We have no involvement. Charlie, you're not interested in commenting on the question? No. Try him on something else. Zone 3.
I'm Jim Vardaman from Jackson, Mississippi. In describing your allocation of capital to your wholly owned subsidiaries, you wrote in the annual report that, quote, you charge managers a high rate for incremental capital they employ and credit them at an equally high rate for capital they release, end quote. How do you determine this high rate, and how do they determine how much capital they can release?
Well, what we try to do with those arrangements, the questions about incentive arrangements we have with managers or other situations where we either advance capital to a wholly owned subsidiary or withdraw it. usually that ties in with the compensation plan. And we want our managers to understand just how highly we do value capital, and we feel there's nothing that creates a better understanding than to charge them for it. So we have different arrangements. Sometimes it's based a little on the history of the company. It may be based a little bit on the industry. It may be based on interest rates at the time that we first draw it up. We have arrangements depending on on those variables and perhaps some others, and perhaps just how we felt the day we drew it up, that range between 14% and 20% in terms of capital advanced. And sometimes we have an arrangement where, if it's a seasonal business, where for a few months of the year when they have a seasonal requirement, we give it to them very cheap at LIBOR, but if they use more capital over beyond that, we start saying, well, that's permanent capital, so we charge them considerably more. Now, if we buy a business that's using a couple $100 million of capital, and we work out a bonus arrangement, and the manager figures out a way to do the business with less capital, we may credit him at a very high rate, same rate we would use in charging him in terms of his bonus arrangement. So we believe in managers knowing that money costs money, and I would say that just generally my experience in business is that most managers, when using their own money, understand that money costs money, but sometimes managers, when using other people's money, start thinking of it a little bit like free money, and that's a habit we don't want to encourage around Berkshire. By sticking these rates on capital, we are telling the people who run our business how much capital is worth to us. And I think that's a useful guideline in terms of the decisions they're making, because we don't make very many decisions about our operating businesses. We make very, very few. I don't see capital budgets in most cases from our 100% owned subsidiaries, and if I don't see them, no one else sees them. I mean, we have no staff at headquarters looking at this kind of thing. We give them great responsibility on them, but we do want them to know how we calibrate the use of capital. And so far, I would say it's really worked quite well. Our managers don't mind being measured, and they like getting. I think they enjoy seeing a batting average posted, and a batting average that does not include a cost of capital is a phony batting average. Charlie?
Well, I certainly agree.
And his name isn't even Buffett. I mean, Zone 4.
My name is Dave Lankus. I'm with Business Insurance Magazine. Some property casualty risk management experts are advising commercial insurance buyers to forge 5- and 10-year policies with their property casualty insurers to promote stronger partnerships with their insurers, as well as to maintain the smooth PC market of the past 7 to 8 years. Do you believe this idea will take hold for most policyholders, and if so, what would be the implications for policyholders' costs and insurers' underwriting results?
The question is about partnerships between probably commercial policyholders and their insurers. And there are a lot of ways of doing that by various retrospective plans or adjustable rates of various sorts and self-insured retentions and that sort of thing. As a general matter, there are only 2 reasons for buying insurance. One is to protect yourself against a loss that you are unable or unwilling to bear yourself. And that is partly an objective decision, and it's partly subjective. For example, a manager that's terribly worried that his board of directors may second-guess him if he has an uninsured loss is going to buy a lot more protection probably than the company really needs, but he knows he's never going to have to go in front of his board of directors and say, we just had $1 million fire loss, and then the next question the director asks is, was it insured? And he doesn't want to answer no. So he may do something that's very unintelligent from the company's standpoint, merely to protect his own position. But the reason for buying insurance is whether, and this is true of life insurance, it's true of property casualty, it's true of personal insurance, it's true of commercial insurance, is to protect against losses that you're unwilling or unable to bear yourself. Or the second reason, which occasionally comes up, is if you think the insurance company is actually selling you a policy that's too cheap, so that you really expect to, over a period of time, to have a mathematical advantage by buying the insurance. Well, we try to avoid selling the second kind and to concentrate on selling the first kind. And we think any company we sell insurance to, and of course much of the insurance we sell is to other insurance companies. I mean, we are a reinsurer in very large part. We are selling them insurance against a loss that they are either unable or unwilling to sustain. And a typical case, might be a company that had a lot of homeowners policies in California, and if those include earthquake coverage, they may not be able to sustain the kind of loss that is possible, even though they want to keep a distribution system in place that merchandises en masse to homeowners in California. So we will write a policy. They may take the first $5 million of loss, they may take the first $50 million of loss, depends on their own capabilities, but then they come to us, and we are really uniquely situated to take care of problems that no one else, that the companies can't bear themselves and that they can't find anybody else to insure. But we really don't want to insure someone for a loss that they can afford themselves, because if we're doing that, it may be because they're dumb, but it may be because they also have a loss expectancy that's higher than the premium we're charging, which is not what we're trying to do in business. I think that I think probably, as compared to 30 years ago, that risk managers at corporations are probably more intelligent about the way they buy their insurance than many years ago. I think it's become I think they're more sophisticated. They've thought it through better. But there's a lot of insurance. There's a fair amount of insurance bought that doesn't make sense, and there's a fair amount of insurance that isn't bought that should be bought. There are certain companies that are exposing themselves in this country to losses which would wipe them out, and they prefer not to buy reinsurance because it's, quote, expensive. But what they're really doing is betting on something that won't happen very often, happening not at all. And if you take a huge hurricane on Long Island, or you take a major quake in California, there are a number of companies that have not positioned themselves to withstand those losses. And if you're a 63-year-old CEO and you figure, I'm going to retire in a couple of years, the odds are pretty good that it won't happen on your watch, but it will happen on somebody's watch. And we try to sell reinsurance to those people, and usually we do, but sometimes we don't. Charlie?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Zone 5. He's saving himself. He'll be dynamite when it gets going.
My name is Hugh Stevenson. I'm a shareholder from Atlanta, Georgia. My question involves the company's catastrophe lines of insurance. It seems that there's a relative ease of entry into that business through Bermuda-based companies and others. And given the importance of that business to the overall company, I'm curious how the ease of entry into the business affects its long-term competitive position and its rates of return.
Well, you're very right. There is an ease of entry into the catastrophe business, and it's sort of attractive it's particularly attractive for promoters, because if you start an insurance company to write earthquake insurance in California, and you raise a few $100 million, and you'll either have essentially no losses, or if you write enough of it, you'll go broke. And most years you'll have no losses. So if your intention is to sell your stock publicly in a year or two, the odds are very good that you will have a beautiful record for a couple of years, and you can sell, and maybe 1 time out of 10 you'll go broke, and 9 times out of 10 you'll sell to somebody else who eventually will go broke. And there's really ease of entry. The only thing that may restrict that is that if the buyer is sophisticated enough to question the viability of that company under really extreme conditions, which is the only conditions that count when you're buying catastrophe insurance, that may restrict it. The second thing is, of course, none of the people that have started up can offer anywhere near the amount of coverage that Berkshire has. Berkshire is really one of a kind in terms of its capital strength in the business. I don't think anybody in Bermuda that I can remember, I don't think Ajit's out there, but I don't think anybody has $1 billion of net worth, and we have at present we probably have close to $13 billion of net worth, and considerably more of value. So we can sustain shocks and we will sustain shocks, I should add, that others can't, and we try to get paid appropriately for that. But when we say we can take $1 billion loss, we can take $1 billion loss, and we will have $1 billion loss at some point. And anyone buying it knows we can take it, or something greater, and they should know that very few of our competitors can. So there's competition. We do an unusual proportion of our business with the 8 or 10 largest reinsurance companies and insurance companies in the world. So we really have established, with the people who understand the real risks of the business, they come to Berkshire, and a lot more often than they stop in Bermuda, because they know that we'll pay, and they've been around long enough to know that in the end that's what really counts with an insurance company. If there were enough capacity at really ridiculous rates, I mean, in the end we wouldn't be writing that business at that time. But I don't think that will happen. It certainly hasn't happened so far. And if it happens, so be it. We will all play golf until the loss occurs. Charlie?
Nothing to add.
Zone 6. Or did we do? Yeah.
Chairman, most company Berkshire invest at this time are not in high technology sector. What we have seen in the last few years, that there seems to be a significant growth both in sales and earnings of the high technology area. And also what your shareholder believe, that the times are changing from a brand name to high technology. My question is, can someone apply your investment principle, business philosophy, and your discipline in life to build a portfolio of, say, 5 or 6 high technology company? Let's call it Berkshire Hathaway Technology Fund.
Well, I think it would sell. The question about Charlie and I won't be able to do it. Charlie probably understands high tech, but you can see how hard it is to get any information out of him. So he hasn't told me yet. We try not to get into things that we don't understand. And if we're going to lose your money, we want to be able to come before you, next year and tell you we lost your money because we thought this and it turned out to be that. We don't want to say, somebody wrote us a report saying this is what's going to happen in some field that we don't understand, and that therefore we lost your money by following someone else's advice. So we won't do it ourselves. I think that Ben Graham's principles are perfectly valid when applied to high-tech companies. It's that we don't know how to do it, but that doesn't mean somebody else doesn't know how to do it. My guess is that if Bill Gates were thinking about that he understood and that I didn't understand, he would apply much the same way of thinking about the investment decision that I would. He would just He would just understand the business. I might think I understand Coca-Cola or Gillette, and he may have the ability to understand a lot of other businesses that seem as clear to him as Coke or Gillette would seem to me. I think once he identified those, he would apply pretty much the same yardsticks in deciding how to act. I think he would act. I think he would have a margin of safety principle. It might be a little different because there's essentially more risk in a high-tech company, but he would still have the margin of safety principle on a sort of adjusted for the mathematical risk of loss in his mind. He would have he would look at it as a business, not as a stock. He would not buy it on borrowed money. I mean, a bunch of principles would be carried through. But our circle of things we understand is really unlikely to enlarge. Maybe a tiny bit here or there, but